Hello everyone. I just wanted to film a quick video because I haven't been uploading a lot recently. I wanted to address the question, does MBTI type matter in dating? So first of all, if you're subscribed to my channel, you might wonder why I haven't made any videos about dating as a subject yet. And that's because of two reasons. First of all, dating hasn't been a big focus for me for a long time in my life. And secondly, I have been pretty bad at it for a while. So that's why I've kind of avoided this subject. But I was thinking, it's interesting. It's an interesting subject to talk about. I also want to make a longer video about INFJs and dating, but I'm gonna wait a bit with that one until I have really sorted out my thoughts about that. So I think for me, I have always just been very wanting to be independent very much, and also just having very strong opinions on everything, and I think that's kind of a problem with introvert intuition mostly, where I think INFJs and INTJs might have this problem of we kind of just have our own view on things, and we enjoy being alone. So for me, for a long time I felt like being in a relationship would just be like a burden, and I enjoy being alone because I have so much freedom, and that's mostly why it's not been a big focus of mine for a long time. And I think maybe more INFJs and INTJs could relate to that as well. Actually, for a while, I even thought that maybe I just never want to be in a relationship because I just couldn't see myself being happier in a relationship than being alone, basically. So yeah, anyway, I hope that explains it. There's much more to it, but I'll talk more about that in another video. So let's focus on, does MBTI type matter in dating? And I would say yes and no, because on the one hand, I think that it kind of does, because, and I'm just gonna use myself as a reference now, because I think when it comes to dating, we all have specific needs, and I think you can't say something like, for example, an INFJ like me needs a certain type. How people would say we're a good match with ENFPs or ENTPs, for example. That's always gonna work. I don't believe that that's true, because I think that depending on a person, if you have an ENFP, for example, you can have two people, I've said this before, of course, but you can have two ENFPs who are very different in, for example, their values and their behavior and their past. Of course, they can still be very different, even if they're both ENFPs. So they can still have different values. And I think when it comes to dating, especially, you're talking about finding a partner that you're gonna spend a lot of time with, and it's not the same as a friendship. You need to be more compatible with each other than if you were just friends. I also have friends that are very different from me, but it works for a while. It works as friends as long as we don't go into too many discussions about things, as long as we don't spend all the time together, right? Then it goes fine even when we're different. But with a partner, you need to be especially compatible. But despite the fact that even if someone has the same personality type, they can be different, of course, there's also this thing there that they're gonna have different needs. And I really believe that one INFJ is not gonna have the same desire for what they want in a relationship than another INFJ, And I think it just depends on what your values are, what you expect from a relationship, and things like your past influence it too, I think. But I think everyone, even if they're the same type, is still gonna have different needs for what they want from a relationship, what they're looking for. Like, what does it look like for you? Like, what are the things you need to have in common, and what are the things that don't matter too much to you, right? Because you're not never going to have everything in common. That's impossible, but there are certain common grounds that you're gonna need. But I think that's different for everyone. Like, what's the most important for you? And that's a lot about how you see your life. And I think just like how everyone has different personal dreams, everyone also has different expectations for what a relationship should look like for them. But I think if you're looking for a partner, the most important thing is to kind of figure that out for yourself. What do you think you need? Because if you know what you need, certain types are going to match that better than other types. That I do think that is true. For example, for me, for some weird reason that I don't really know why, I have gravitated a bit towards people with strong introverted feeling. So there is a certain pattern, in terms of what type I tend to gravitate towards when it comes to dating. But I mean, I'm not gonna say I have a lot of data on this because I haven't dated a lot of people, but still, it's still interesting that there's sort of a pattern when it comes to also not only the people I've dated, but also the people I've like have been interested in. And I really think it all comes down to your values, bit like your past, like what can you handle. It's also this thing like you used to live with your parents and now you're gonna be with a partner. Like, there are certain things maybe that you grew up with that you were really annoyed. I also have that. Like, some things annoyed me, and then when you are gonna be with a partner, you kind of want to be rid of those things, like things that used to annoy you in your childhood, maybe about the way you lived, like thinking I want certain things to be different, or think about people you've dated in the past and what you didn't like in the end about them. Like, in the end, why did you separate? What went wrong? Like, that really helped me to think about like what I need, because it's like thinking about, okay, what went wrong, and does it tell me something about what are things in a relationship that are really important to me that I didn't have? For example, thinking about that, I think it's a very personal thing, but I think that everyone has maybe certain MBTI types that kind of meet their needs more than other types. For example, for me, one thing I realized later, like quite recently, is that I think I need a feeler. And that's just personal. I think not all INFJs are gonna necessarily need a feeler, but it's something that I think I need, because for some reason it just makes me feel really comfortable in a relationship when I can be completely emotion driven and emotion focused all the time. And with a feeler, I don't have to be afraid that I can't do that, and or that they're not gonna show me their emotions, like. And I think that's personal, but I think that that's still like, I can still say that my needs are met by certain types more than other types. But I don't think it's as simple as like, oh, if you're an INFJ, you need an ENFP or an ENTP because that's gonna be perfect. Like, I don't think it's that simple, and I think that we can work well, we can be compatible with a lot of people, a lot of different types. But there might be a few types that are just gonna be like a no for you. For example, I I just don't see myself being with someone who's like thinking dominant. I just don't see it. I also don't really see myself with an ESTP. because I don't even have ESTP friends. You know, it's a type that I don't think I'm have much in common with at all. You know, then that doesn't mean I have anything against them, but it just means that we just don't have the same interests. You know. So that's my answer. At least for me, I say yes and no. So it's a bit tricky. But that's how I see it. So that's just a short discussion to open up the conversation about dating on my channel, I guess, because I've never made a video about that before. I'm gonna make another video on this that's longer, that's more about INFJ and dating, about my own experience, I guess. But I'm gonna need some more thought on that before I make it. So, hope you have a nice day. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.